The Aran Collective had once been strong. Their cities stretched across their home planet like veins of glass and stone, catching starlight and turning it into soft, glowing music. They were not like humans. Their bodies were made of silicon, hard, slow, and shaped by time itself. They did not breathe air or bleed red. Instead, they pulsed with energy drawn from deep within their world, and they spoke in low tones that vibrated through rock and metal. But now, their world was dying. A strange force had appeared near the edge of their star system. At first, it was just a flicker in their sensors, something odd but not alarming. Then their outer colonies began to fall silent. One by one, the signals stopped. When scout ships went to check, they found only ruins, not destroyed by bombs or war but by age. Everything looked ancient, as if thousands of years had passed in just weeks. Metal crumbled to dust. Crystal towers cracked like old bones. Even the air felt tired. The scientists called it an entropy wave. It wasn't fire or ice. It was something worse. It made time move too fast. It aged matter, broke physics, and twisted space until nothing could hold its shape. And it was moving toward there. The Arans tried everything. They built shields from quantum fields. They fired pulses of anti-entropy energy. They even tried moving whole cities underground. Nothing worked. The wave chewed through their best defenses like paper. The elders, who had lived for centuries, now moved slowly, their surfaces dull and cracked. Hope was fading faster than their cities. In a deep vault beneath the silent spire, their oldest and tallest tower, a young archivist named searched through old data crystals. Most were unreadable, their information lost to time. But one file glowed faintly. It was labeled Universal Distress Ping Protocol 0. She had heard stories of this. It was from the earliest days of their space travel, long before they had faster-than-light ships. Back then, they believed the universe might be full of other minds, so they created a message that could be understood by anyone, any species, any language. It didn't ask for weapons or money. It just said, "We are in danger. If you can help, please come." It was never meant to be used. It was a last resort, like shouting into a storm and hoping someone hears you. Brought the file to the High Council. The elders were quiet for a long time. One finally spoke, voice rough like grinding stone. "No one will hear it. The galaxy is vast and empty." "But what if someone does?" asked. Another elder shook their head. "Even if they answer, what could they do? We have failed with all our knowledge." "Then we have nothing to lose," she said. The council agreed, not because they believed it would work, but because they had run out of other choices. Deep in the planet's core, where the last power station still hummed, activated the old transmitter. The signal was weak. The relays were falling apart, but it went out anyway, a soft cry wrapped in math and light, aimed at every direction at once. It traveled through dead space, past broken satellites, around black holes, and through dust clouds that hadn't moved in eons. Most of it faded, but a small piece, just enough, found its way to a lonely human outpost drifting far beyond the Milky Way. Project Echo had been built 300 years ago. Its mission was simple: listen for alien life. Back then, Earth still wondered if it was alone. Now most people had forgotten about Echo. Its solar panels were cracked. Its drones were frozen in sleep mode. But one part still worked, a small AI core, stubborn and outdated, running on backup power. When the Aran signal floated past, the AI tried to understand it, but its language database was old. It didn't know silicon-based speech patterns. It heard the distress tones and matched them to a human military code used during the Mars uprisings. It saw the signal's origin tag, but the data was corrupted. Instead of reading Unknown Origin System, it read Priority 1 Sol Command Relay. The AI did what it was trained to do. It sent an emergency alert straight to Earth's United Stellar Command. At the moon base, alarms rang out in the middle of the night shift. Officers rushed to their stations. On screen, a message played, broken, filled with static but clear enough. "Help, fatting, end." Admiral was woken by a personal call. She pulled on her uniform and walked quickly through the quiet halls. Her face was calm, but her mind raced. She had seen many strange things in her 30 years of service: alien ruins, rogue comets, even a sentient nebula once. But this felt different. In the command room, Tex played the message again. "It's not human," said one young officer. "The frequencies are all wrong." "But it's using our emergency format," another said. "Like someone heard our old broadcasts in them." Listened closely. Beneath the noise she heard fear, real desperate fear. That was enough. "Protocol is clear," she said. "Any priority 1 distress call must be answered, no matter the source." "But Admiral," said the captain of the watch, "what if it's a trap? We don't know who sent this." Looked at him. "If it's a trap, we'll handle it. If it's real, someone is dying out there, and we're the only ones who heard them." Within the hour, the First Fleet was ready. It wasn't huge, just 4 ships. The carrier Aegis, 2 destroyers named Vigil and Storm, and the Genesis, a massive dreadnought built for terraforming dead worlds. It carried machines that could melt ice, create air, and seed oceans. No one had ever taken it into unknown territory, but believed in being ready for anything. The stars shimmered like scattered diamonds against the endless blackness of space. Elysium Delta, a small human colony nestled on the edge of explored territory, was quiet that night. The air buzzed faintly with the hum of machinery and the occasional chatter of colonists as they went about their evening routines. It was peaceful, a fragile bubble of civilization surrounded by the vast, cold unknown. Elysium Delta wasn't much to look at compared to Earth's gleaming megacities or even the bustling trade hubs closer to the galactic core. Its buildings were functional rather than fancy, constructed from prefabricated materials shipped in decades ago when the first settlers arrived. But for the people who called it home, it was everything. A fresh start, a chance to build something new far away from the overcrowded worlds humanity had left behind. Yet tonight, no one noticed the strange ripple in the sky. No alarms blared, no warning lights flashed. The sensors that were supposed to detect incoming threats remained silent, lulled into complacency by years of uneventful nights. And so, when the first alien ship appeared just beyond the atmosphere, it caught everyone completely off guard. The vessel was massive, easily dwarfing any human cruiser ever built. Its surface glowed faintly with an eerie green light, pulsating rhythmically like some kind of living organism. As it descended, smaller ships poured out from its belly, dozens of them, sleek and predatory, moving with unnatural speed. They spread across the sky, blotting out the stars, casting long shadows over the colony below. Inside the command center, panic erupted almost immediately. Lieutenant, the officer on duty, stared wide-eyed at her monitor as the readings came in. "Multiple unidentified contacts," she shouted, her voice trembling. "They're not responding to hails." "What do you mean, not responding?" demanded Captain Elias Grant, rushing into the room. He was a grizzled veteran, his face lined with worry but his posture still commanding. "Send another message. Tell them we're a civilian outpost. We don't want trouble." Nodded furiously, her fingers flying over the console. But before she could finish typing, the entire base shook violently. Lights flickered, and dust rained down from the ceiling. Outside, explosions lit up the horizon. One of the colony's power generators had been hit. "Damn it," Grant barked, grabbing a nearby comm device. "All units report to defensive positions. This is not a drill." Colonists scrambled through the streets, confusion giving way to terror as more blasts rocked the ground beneath their feet. Families clung to each other, searching for shelter. Some ran toward the bunkers dug deep underground, while others tried to fight back, wielding whatever weapons they could find. But none of them stood a chance against what was coming. The attackers were brutal and efficient. Their ships hovered low, unleashing torrents of energy beams that tore through walls and melted metal. Ground troops followed soon after, spilling out of drop pods like insects swarming a hive. They were tall, and their exoskeletons gleaming under the artificial lights. Each carried weapons that made short work of anything, or anyone, in their path. Among the chaos stood Dr. Carter, a scientist who had come to Elysium Delta to study its unique ecosystem. She crouched behind a toppled cargo crate, clutching a stolen plasma pistol she barely knew how to use. Her heart pounded in her chest as she watched the invaders march closer, their movements unnervingly synchronized. "They're everywhere," whispered Tom, a young engineer hiding beside her. His face was pale, streaked with dirt and sweat. "We can't hold them off." Swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. "We have to try," she said firmly. "If we give up now, they win." But deep down, she wondered how long they could last. The colony's defenses were laughable compared to this onslaught. Even if reinforcements somehow arrived, it would take days or weeks for them to reach such a remote location. By then, there might be nothing left to save. As the battle raged on, Captain Grant retreated to the communication hub, determined to send one last message. The room was cramped and dimly lit, filled with blinking consoles and tangled wires. He ignored the chaos outside, focusing instead on the task at hand. "This is Captain Elias Grant of Elysium Delta," he began, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "We are under attack by an unknown hostile force. Repeat, unknown hostile force. Request immediate assistance. Coordinates attached. Please, anyone, help us." He pressed the transmit button, sending the signal hurtling through the void. For a moment there was silence. Then static crackled over the speakers, followed by a faint beep indicating the message had been sent. Whether anyone would hear it or care enough to respond was anyone's guess. Grant slumped into a chair, exhaustion washing over him. He glanced at the screen showing the ongoing destruction outside. Fires burned unchecked, smoke billowing into the sky. The colony's once bright future was crumbling before his eyes. And yet, somewhere in the depths of space, the distress call traveled onward. It skipped past nearby systems, ignored by passing freighters and wary traders. It drifted through asteroid fields and nebulae, growing weaker with every parsec. Most would have dismissed it as background noise, lost among the countless transmissions crisscrossing the galaxy. But then, impossibly, it reached something. Far beyond the borders of known space, hidden within a region shrouded in perpetual storms, lay a fleet unlike any other. These ships were dark and jagged, their hulls from countless battles. They belonged to the legendary warriors feared and respected by all who dared cross their path. Commander sat in the command chair of his flagship, brooding over ancient maps of the galaxy. His sharp amber eyes scanned the data scrolling across the screens around him. Normally, he paid little attention to the constant stream of signals that passed through the region. Humanity's petty squabbles held no interest for him. But this time something caught his ear. The desperate tone of the transmission, the mention of courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Slowly, a grim smile spread across his face. "It seems someone needs our help," he muttered, rising to his feet. His voice carried authority, cutting through the low murmur of his crew. "Prepare the fleet. We're going hunting." No one questioned him. To do so would be suicide. Was not just a leader. He was a symbol of everything that stood for strength, honor, and an unyielding will to survive. If he said they were moving, they moved. As the fleet roared to life, engines flaring with raw power, allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He didn't know these humans personally, but he recognized their spirit. Fragile though they might be, they refused to go quietly into the night. That kind of bravery deserved respect and protection. With a final glance at the coordinates embedded in the SOS message, gave the order. "Set course for Elysium Delta. Let's show these invaders what happens when they mess with the wrong species." The fleet surged forward, disappearing into hyperspace. Behind them, the storm clouds churned ominously, as if the universe itself sensed the fury about to be unleashed. Part 2. The fleet moved through the void like a shadow cast by some great and terrible beast. Each ship was a jagged, menacing silhouette against the endless blackness of space. Their hulls were dark, almost blending into the darkness itself, but faint red lights glowed along their edges, marking their presence to anyone brave or foolish enough to look too closely. These vessels weren't sleek or graceful. They were brutal, built for war and survival in the harshest environments imaginable. Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, the ironclad Revenant. His massive frame loomed over the crew, who worked tirelessly at their stations. Sharp amber eyes scanned the screens displaying data about the SOS signal. He had already memorized the coordinates of Elysium Delta, and his mind raced with thoughts of what awaited them there. The message had been desperate, filled with fear and urgency. Whoever, or whatever, was attacking those humans would soon learn why crossing paths with them was always a fatal mistake. Turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant. "How long until we reach the target?" he asked, his deep voice cutting through the low hum of activity on the bridge. "Approximately 3 hours," replied, his gravelly tone matching the grim determination etched across his face. "We'll arrive ahead of schedule." Nodded satisfied. 3 hours wasn't fast enough for his liking, but it would have to do. He stepped closer to the main viewport, staring out into the infinite expanse of stars. Somewhere out there, a human colony was fighting for its life and failing. He could feel it in his bones, but when they arrived, the tide would turn. It always did. Deep within the fleet, preparations were. Soldiers clad in heavy armor moved through the corridors of the ships, checking weapons and equipment. They carried plasma rifles, energy blades, and grenades capable of leveling entire buildings. Each warrior was a living weapon, honed by years of surviving on one of the deadliest planets in existence, there known simply as. Among them was Sergeant, a seasoned fighter with a reputation for unmatched ferocity in battle. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, his muscular frame was covered in scars earned during countless conflicts. His piercing green eyes burned with intensity as he addressed his squad. "We don't know what we're walking into," growled, his voice echoing in the cramped briefing room. "But one thing is certain. These invaders are strong enough to push humans to their breaking point. That doesn't mean they're ready for us." His words drew murmurs of agreement from the gathered soldiers. Every one of them knew the stakes. This wasn't just another fight. It was an opportunity to remind the galaxy why they were feared above all others. Weakness was not tolerated among their ranks, and mercy was rarely shown to those who preyed on the innocent. Slammed his fist against the table, silencing the room. "When we hit the ground, we hit hard. No hesitation, no retreat. We crush them before they even realize what's coming." The soldiers roared in approval, their voices reverberating through the ship. They were ready. More than ready, they were eager. For every battle was a chance to prove themselves, to demonstrate that survival wasn't just instinct, it was destiny. Back on the bridge, reflected on humanity's place in the galaxy. He remembered the first time his people had encountered humans centuries ago. It had been during a failed colonization attempt on itself. Thousands of settlers had landed, believing they could tame the planet's harsh environment. Within weeks, most were dead, victims of vicious predators, toxic storms, and unforgiving terrain. Only a handful survived, and even they left broken and defeated. Despite their fragility, had always respected humans, not because they were strong or advanced, far from it, but because they refused to give up. Even when faced with impossible odds, they kept trying, kept striving. In a way, they reminded him of his own kind. Fragile bodies, perhaps, but indomitable spirits. This respect was part of why he had decided to respond to the SOS. Honor demanded it. Courage deserved recognition, no matter how small or insignificant the source might seem. If these humans were willing to fight to protect their home, then they would stand beside them. And if their attackers thought they could get away with such cowardice, they were gravely mistaken. As the fleet closed in on Elysium Delta, gave the order to arm all weapons systems. Plasma cannons charged with a low hum, missile bays opened, and shields flared to life around each ship. They were preparing to unleash hell, and they wouldn't stop until their enemies were nothing more than ash floating in the void. Meanwhile, back at Elysium Delta, the situation was growing increasingly dire. The colony was in ruins, its once proud structures reduced to smoldering wreckage. Fires raged unchecked, sending thick plumes of smoke spiraling into the sky. Survivors huddled together in underground bunkers, their faces pale with fear and exhaustion. Above them, the alien invaders continued their relentless assault, hunting down anyone foolish enough to resist. The attackers were called a species infamous for their ruthlessness and expansionist ambitions. Their forms made them look more like machines than living beings, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming under the artificial lights. They communicated using clicks and hisses, their language incomprehensible to human ears. What little was known about them painted a chilling picture. Conquerors who saw weaker species as nothing more than resources to exploit or exterminate. Warlord, the leader of the fleet, stalked through the remains of the colony, his mandibles clicking in satisfaction. Around him, his troops rounded up survivors, herding them into cages like livestock. Cared little for the humans themselves. They were merely pawns in a larger game. By crushing this colony, he intended to send a message to other worlds. Resist and you will suffer the same fate. But victory celebration was short-lived. High above the planet, sensors aboard his flagship detected incoming ships. At first, he dismissed the readings as debris or malfunctioning equipment. Then, as the readings grew clearer, his antennae twitched in irritation. "What is this?" he hissed, turning to his second-in-command. "More humans, impossible." "No, my lord," the subordinate replied nervously. "These ships, they do not match any known design, they are unknown." His mandibles snapped shut, his glowing yellow eyes narrowing. Unknown ships meant unknown threats, and they did not tolerate surprises. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered coldly. "Destroy whatever dares approach." His orders came too late. The fleet emerged from hyperspace with breathtaking speed, materializing directly above Elysium Delta. For a brief moment, there was silence as both sides assessed the situation. Then, without warning, they struck. Energy beams lanced out from their ships, tearing through the fleet like paper. Shields collapsed, hulls shattered, and entire vessels exploded in brilliant bursts of light. The firepower was overwhelming, their aim precise and merciless. Within minutes, half of the fleet lay in ruins, drifting lifelessly through space. On the surface, the ground troops reacted with equal ferocity. Descended from the sky, disgorging squads of heavily armed. They moved with terrifying efficiency, cutting down soldiers before they could mount a proper defense. Plasma blades flashed in the dim light, severing limbs and carving through exoskeletons with ease. The humans, still hiding in their bunkers, watched in stunned disbelief as their attackers were suddenly overwhelmed. At first, they thought it was some kind of trick, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and despair. But as the sounds of battle shifted, from the relentless pounding of weapons to the sharp cracks of plasma fire, they realized something extraordinary was happening. One by one, they ventured outside, blinking in the harsh light of the burning colony. What they saw comprehension. Towering figures clad in dark armor strode through the streets, slaughtering with ruthless precision. Behind them, the sky blazed with the wreckage of alien ships, falling like meteors toward the horizon. Dr. Carter emerged from her hiding place, clutching her plasma pistol tightly. Her hands trembled as she took in the scene. Who are they?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the din of combat. "They're here to help us," said Captain Grant, appearing beside her. His voice was hoarse but steady, his eyes wide with awe. "They answered our call." Stared at him, unsure whether to believe what she was hearing. Reinforcements. From where and how? None of it made sense. But as she watched them continue their relentless advance, she felt a spark of hope ignite within her chest. Maybe, just maybe, they weren't doomed after all. In orbit, Commander observed the unfolding chaos with grim satisfaction. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. Still, knew the fight was far from over. Warlord's flagship remained intact, its defenses holding firm against the onslaught. If they wanted to end this, they would need to strike at the heart of the enemy. "Target the command ship," ordered, his voice cold and commanding. "Let's finish this." The fleet responded immediately, redirecting their firepower towards vessel. Energy beams converged on the massive ship, battering its shields until they finally gave way. As the flagship reeled from the assault, activated the comm system, broadcasting a message to the leader. "This is Commander of the fleet," he growled, his voice dripping with menace. "Your attack ends now. Surrender or be annihilated." For a moment there was silence. Then, a reply crackled through the speakers, a series of angry clicks and hisses, followed by a translation overlay provided by the ship's AI. "You dare challenge us?" snarled. "Do you even know who we are?" "I know exactly who you are," replied evenly. "Cowards who prey on the weak, that ends today." Let out a guttural roar, his rage evident even through the distorted transmission. "You think your primitive fleet can stop me? I will tear you apart." Smirked unimpressed, "We'll see." With that, he ended the communication and turned to his crew. "Prepare boarding parties. If won't surrender, we'll take him down ourselves." They didn't wait for orders. They were already suiting up, arming themselves for the final assault. This wasn't just a battle anymore, it was personal. And when they got personal, no force in the galaxy could stand against them. As the boarding ships launched towards flagship, gripped the hilt of his plasma blade, anticipation coursing through his veins. They had made a grave mistake by attacking humanity. Now, they would learn why they were feared above all others. Part 3. The boarding ships of the fleet tore through space like daggers aimed at their target. Each vessel was small but heavily armored, designed to punch through enemy defenses and deliver its deadly cargo directly into the heart of the fight. Inside one of these ships, Commander stood tall, his massive frame braced against the vibrations of the engines as they closed in on Warlord's flagship. His amber eyes glowed faintly in the dim red light of the cabin, reflecting both determination and fury. Around him, his elite strike team prepared for what lay ahead. These warriors were the best of the best, each one chosen not just for their combat skills but for their unshakable loyalty to and their code of honor. They moved with precision, checking weapons, securing armor plates, and exchanging quiet words of encouragement. There was no fear among them, only focus. This wasn't just another mission, it was a test of everything they stood for. As the boarding ship approached the flagship, the hull shuddered violently as it collided with the larger vessel. Magnetic clamps locked into place, and the airlock hissed open. Without hesitation, led the charge, stepping onto the alien ship with his plasma blade ignited in a searing arc of blue-white energy. Behind him, his team followed, weapons raised and ready. The interior of the flagship was chaotic. Alarms blared deafeningly, flashing red lights casting an eerie glow over the metallic corridors. The walls were slick with some kind of viscous fluid that pulsed faintly, mimicking the rhythm of the ship itself. It felt alive, organic even, which only added to the unsettling atmosphere. For humans, such a sight might have been terrifying. But for those who had grown up surrounded by far worse horrors, it barely registered. Moved forward without pause, his heavy boots crunching against debris scattered across the floor. Ahead, a group of soldiers scrambled to form a defensive line, their bodies clicking and hissing in agitation. Their weapons spat bursts of green plasma, but the shots ricocheted harmlessly off the thick shields projected by his armor. With a roar, he surged forward, swinging his plasma blade in wide arcs that cut through the aliens like paper. Bodies fell in pieces, their glowing yellow blood splattering the walls. Behind him, the rest of the strike team unleashed hell. Plasma rifles fired in controlled bursts, dropping enemies before they could react. Energy grenades detonated with deafening booms, sending shockwaves rippling through the corridor. Within moments, they were overwhelmed, their disciplined ranks crumbling under the sheer ferocity of the assault. Yet despite their initial success, knew this was only the beginning. The deeper they went into the ship, the stronger the resistance would become, wouldn't let them reach him easily, and respected that. He expected nothing less from a worthy opponent. Meanwhile, back on the surface of Elysium Delta, the tide of battle had shifted dramatically thanks to the arrival of the fleet. The remaining ground forces found themselves caught between two fronts, the relentless onslaught of the soldiers and the unexpected defiance of the human survivors. Dr. Carter stood near the edge of the battlefield, clutching her plasma pistol tightly. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had never been a fighter, but watching the inspired something in her, a spark of courage she didn't know she possessed. When she saw a group of colonists being cornered by troops, she acted without thinking, firing her weapon and drawing the aliens' attention away from the civilians. "Over here," she shouted, waving wildly to get the attention. A squad of towering warriors turned toward her, their glowing eyes locking onto the threat. In seconds, they were upon them, cutting them down with brutal efficiency. One of them, an imposing figure with jagged scars running down the side of his face, nodded to as he passed. "Good work," he rumbled in broken English, his voice deep and gravelly. Then he was gone, charging into the fray once more. Stared after him, stunned. She hadn't expected gratitude or acknowledgement from these fearsome warriors, but there it was, plain as day. It made her feel useful, important. For the first time since the invasion began, she believed they might actually win. Across the colony, similar scenes played out. Human survivors emerged from hiding, emboldened by the presence of their newfound allies. Some joined the fight directly, using scavenged weapons or makeshift tools to take down. Others worked to tend to the wounded, organize supplies, or fortify positions. Together, they formed an unlikely but effective partnership with the. Captain Grant watched it all unfold with a mixture of pride and disbelief. He had spent years protecting Elysium Delta, always knowing how vulnerable it was to outside threats. Yet now, here they were, standing shoulder to shoulder with beings who seemed almost mythic in their power. It was surreal, but undeniable. "They're incredible," Grant muttered to himself, shaking his head. Beside him, Lieutenant nodded, her expression grim but determined. "They're giving us a chance," she said softly. "We can't waste it." Grant glanced at her, then back at the battlefield. "No," he agreed, "we won't." Back aboard the flagship, and his team pushed deeper into the labyrinthine corridors, leaving trails of destruction in their wake. Every step brought them closer to their goal, Warlord. Along the way, they encountered increasingly fierce resistance, including automated turrets and swarms of smaller, spider-like drones that scuttled across the walls and ceilings. But none of it slowed them down. If anything, the challenges only fueled their resolve. At last, they reached a massive door marked with intricate carvings that pulsed with faint green light. Raised a hand, signaling his team to hold position. Then, with a single powerful strike of his plasma blade, he sliced through the locking mechanism. The door slid open with a low groan, revealing a cavernous chamber beyond. Inside, Warlord awaited them. Towering over even the largest, he was a monstrous figure, his exoskeleton gleaming like polished obsidian. Multiple sets of glowing yellow eyes scanned the intruders, and long, segmented limbs clicked together in anticipation. At his side stood two hulking bodyguards, each armed with oversized energy blades. "So," hissed, his voice dripping with contempt, "you are the ones who dare challenge me." Stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "I am," he growled, "and you will answer for your crimes against humanity." Let out a guttural laugh, his mandibles snapping shut with a sharp crack. "Humanity? Weak, fragile, unworthy of survival. You waste your strength defending them." His lips curled into a snarl. "They are brave, determined. That is worth more than brute force alone." Without another word, lunged forward, his claws slashing through the air. ducked beneath the attack, countering with a swift slash of his plasma blade. The weapon struck true, carving a deep gash into his armored side. Green ichor sprayed outward, but the warlord showed no sign of pain. Instead, he roared in anger, pressing the attack with renewed ferocity. The battle that followed was brutal and chaotic. Speed and size made him a formidable opponent, while relied on his agility and precision. Plasma clashed against chitin, sparks flying with every blow. Around them, the bodyguards attacked, forcing his team to intervene. The chamber became a blur of motion and sound, filled with shouts, hisses, and the crackle of energy weapons. Despite the odds, held his ground. Blow after blow, he pushed back, driving the warlord toward the center of the room. Finally, with a mighty swing, he shattered one of his arms, sending it clattering to the ground. The warlord stumbled, momentarily off balance, and that was all needed. With a final, devastating strike, drove his plasma blade straight through his chest. The warlord froze, his glowing eyes dimming as the life drained from him. Then, with a final shudder, he collapsed to the floor, dead. Silence fell over the chamber as the remaining dropped their weapons, realizing their leader had fallen. Turned to his team, breathing heavily but victorious. "Secure the area," he ordered. "Make sure no one escapes." As his warriors moved to carry out his command, took a moment to look around. The cost of victory was clear. His armor was scorched and dented, and several of his men bore fresh wounds. But they had done what they came to do. They would not threaten humanity again, not anytime soon. Outside, the surviving colonists cheered as news of the flagship's capture spread. Though the cost had been high, hope burned brightly once more. And somewhere above, amidst the wreckage of the fleet, they prepared for the next phase of their mission, ensuring that Earth and all its people would never be caught unprepared again. Part 4. The victory aboard the flagship was far from complete. Though Warlord lay dead, his bodyguards and remaining forces refused to surrender. They fought with desperate ferocity, knowing that their survival depended on it. The chamber where stood was still filled with the sounds of battle as his warriors worked to neutralize the last pockets of resistance. Moved through the chaos like a storm, his plasma blade cutting down enemies with every swing. His armor was battered, scorched in places, but he showed no signs of slowing. Each step he took radiated authority, and his glowing amber eyes burned with unrelenting focus. He wasn't just fighting for himself or his people. He was fighting for the humans who had called out for help. Their courage had inspired him, and now it fueled him. One of the bodyguards lunged at, its oversized claws aimed directly at his chest. The attack effortlessly, grabbing the creature's arm mid-swing and twisting it until the joint snapped. With a sharp crack, the alien dropped to its knees, only to be silenced permanently by a swift strike from his blade. Around him, his team continued their relentless assault, working together with practiced efficiency. But they weren't giving up easily. Reinforcements poured into the chamber from side corridors, forcing them to adapt quickly. Sergeant barked orders to his squad, directing them to form a defensive line while others pushed forward. Energy blasts lit up the room, filling the air with smoke and the acrid smell of burning metal. Despite the odds, they held their ground, their superior training and equipment making all the difference. As the battle raged on, his mind raced. Killing had been a major blow to them, but it wasn't enough to guarantee victory. If any part of their fleet escaped, they could regroup and return stronger and angrier than before. No, this had to end here. Every single ship needed to be destroyed, and if that meant taking risks, so be it. Shouted over the din of combat, "Get me a direct link to the fleet. We need to escalate." Lieutenant nodded, tapping commands into his wrist console. Within moments, his voice echoed across the comms system, reaching every vessel in orbit around Elysium Delta. "All ships, this is Commander. Target the remaining enemy vessels. Use maximum firepower. Leave nothing intact." The response came immediately, a chorus of acknowledgments from captains eager to finish what they'd started. Above the planet, the fleet unleashed its full might. Plasma cannons roared to life, firing continuous streams of energy that tore through hulls. Missiles streaked through space, detonating in brilliant bursts of light that illuminated the battlefield. One by one, the ships fell, their once imposing forms reduced to drifting debris. On the surface of Elysium Delta, the surviving colonists watched the skis in awe. The explosions above were visible even from the ground, painting the horizon with fiery hues of orange and red. For days, they had lived in fear of certain that death was inevitable. Now, hope surged within them, driven by the knowledge that their unlikely saviors were winning. Dr. Carter stood near the edge of the colony, her eyes fixed on the heavens. She clutched a medical kit tightly in her hands, ready to tend to anyone injured in the ongoing fight. Beside her, Captain Grant spoke into a comm device, coordinating efforts between the human defenders and the. Together, they worked to secure the area and ensure no stray forces remained. "This is incredible," murmured, shaking her head in disbelief. "I never thought we'd make it." Grant glanced at her, his expression grim but resolute. "We didn't. Not on our own, anyway. There's something else entirely." "They saved us," said softly. Her voice carried a mix of gratitude and wonder. "But why? Why would they risk so much for us?" Grant hesitated, unsure how to answer. He had seen in action, their strength, their skill, their sheer determination, but he couldn't claim to understand their motives fully. All he knew was that they had come when no one else would. That alone was reason enough to trust them. Nearby, a group of colonists cheered as another ship exploded in the sky. Some raised makeshift banners bearing crude drawings of warriors, symbols of gratitude and admiration. Others worked tirelessly to clean up the wreckage left behind by the invaders, determined to rebuild what had been lost. Even in the face of devastation, the spirit of humanity burned brightly. Back aboard the flagship surveyed the aftermath of the battle. The chamber was littered with bodies both ends. Though victorious, the cost had been high. Several of his finest warriors lay among the fallen, their sacrifices ensuring the mission's success. Knelt beside one of them, a young soldier named, whose helmet bore the scratches of countless battles. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow but steady. She was alive for now. "Medic," barked, gesturing for assistance. A pair of medics rushed forward, lifting onto a stretcher and carrying her toward the boarding ship. Watched them go, his jaw tightening. Every loss weighed heavily on him, but there was no time to mourn. Not yet. As the last of the forces were subdued, turned his attention to securing the ship. Teams of engineers and technicians swept through the corridors, disabling weapons systems and gathering intelligence. Anything valuable would be sent back to the fleet, while the rest would be left to drift until it eventually broke apart. Made his way to the command center, where Lieutenant awaited him. Screens displayed real-time updates from the fleet, showing the rapid destruction of the remaining ships. Only a handful remained, and those were retreating hastily, trying to escape the slaughter. "They're running," reported, his tone laced with satisfaction. "Shall we pursue?" Considered the question for a moment. Pursuing the fleeing ships would mean leaving Elysium Delta temporarily undefended. While the fleet was more than capable of handling any lingering threats, wasn't willing to take chances, not after everything they'd accomplished. Instead, he gave a different order. "No, let them go. Spread word of what happened here. Let the galaxy know that attacking humanity comes at a price." Nodded, relaying the command to the fleet. Moments later, the last of the ships vanished into hyperspace, their retreat marking the end of the battle. Silence fell over the flagship, broken only by the hum of machinery and the distant echo of footsteps. With the immediate threat neutralized, turned his thoughts to the survivors below. He activated the comm system once more, broadcasting a message to the colony. "This is Commander of the fleet. The enemy has been defeated. You are safe." His words were met with cheers from the colonists, their voices carrying through the open channels. Allowed himself a rare smile, though it was fleeting. There was still much to do. Repairs needed to be made, defenses strengthened, and plans laid for the future. But for now, the people of Elysium Delta could breathe easy. As the boarding ships returned to the fleet, stepped onto the bridge of the ironclad Revenant. From there, he could see the full scope of the devastation below. Fire still burned in parts of the colony and smoke rose in thick plumes. Yet amidst the ruin, there was also resilience. Humans worked side by side with soldiers, clearing debris and tending to the wounded. It was a sight that filled with quiet pride. "They're strong," remarked, standing beside him. "For being so fragile, they have remarkable endurance." Nodded slowly. Strength isn't always about physical power. Sometimes it's about will, about refusing to give up no matter how bad things get. Chuckled softly, sounds like something I would say. Didn't respond. Instead, he gazed down at the colony, his mind turning to the lessons learned during this mission. Humanity might not possess the same raw strength or advanced technology as other species, but they had something equally valuable: heart. And in his eyes, that made them worthy of protection, even if they didn't realize it themselves. "We'll stay until they're ready to stand on their own," said finally. "Then we'll leave, but we won't forget them, not ever." Nodded in agreement. They had come to Elysium Delta as strangers, answering a cry for help. Now they were leaving as allies, united by shared bloodshed and mutual respect. Whatever challenges lay ahead, knew one thing for certain: humanity's potential was limitless, if given the chance to thrive. And they would ensure they got that chance. Part 5. The sun rose over Elysium Delta, casting long shadows across the battered colony. Smoke still lingered in the air, mixing with the faint scent of burnt metal and scorched earth. But despite the destruction, there was a sense of quiet determination among the survivors. The streets were filled with activity as colonists worked tirelessly to rebuild their homes, their faces etched with exhaustion but also resolve. Together, they pieced together what had been broken brick by brick, beam by beam. Commander stood at the edge of the colony, watching the humans go about their tasks. His towering frame was unmistakable, even from a distance, his dark armor gleaming faintly in the morning light. He didn't speak or interfere, he simply observed. There was something deeply human about this moment, the way they refused to let despair define them. It reminded him of his own people, who had fought tooth and nail to survive on a planet that seemed determined to kill them every day. Nearby, Dr. Carter approached cautiously, her steps hesitant. She had seen the in action, witnessed their strength and ferocity firsthand. Yet standing before now, she felt a strange mix of awe and gratitude. For all their fearsome reputation, these warriors had saved her people when no one else would. "Commander," she began, her voice soft but steady, "thank you." Turned to face her, his amber eyes locking onto hers. For a moment he said nothing, simply studying her expression. Then slowly he nodded. "You don't need to thank me," he replied, his deep voice calm and measured. "You earned our help. Your courage called us here." Blinked, taken aback by his words. Courage. She hadn't thought of herself or any of the colonists as particularly brave. They had simply done what they had to do to survive. But looking into his eyes, she realized he meant it. To him, fighting back, even against impossible odds, was an act worthy of respect. "I hope we can repay you someday," said finally, her voice trembling slightly. "What you've done for us, it's more than we could ever ask for." His lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "You already have," he said. "By refusing to give up, by standing your ground, that's repayment enough." Elsewhere in the colony, Captain Grant oversaw the distribution of supplies brought by the crates of food, medicine, and advanced tools lined the central square, each marked with unfamiliar symbols that glowed faintly in the sunlight. These weren't just gifts, they were lifelines, ensuring the colonists had everything they needed to recover and rebuild. Grant moved among the crowd, answering questions and offering reassurance where he could. Many of the colonists expressed their gratitude openly, shaking hands with the soldiers or bowing deeply in respect. Others simply stared, too overwhelmed to find the right words. Grant understood both reactions. After all, how do you thank someone who has literally saved your world? As he passed by a group of children, he noticed one of them clutching a small model of a ship. The boy looked up at him, his eyes wide with wonder. "Are they really leaving?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Grant knelt down so he was eye level with the child. "Yes," he said gently, "but they'll always remember us, and we'll remember them." The boy nodded solemnly, clutching the toy. Grant ruffled his hair before standing up again. As much as he hated to admit it, the departure left a void, a reminder of how fragile their existence truly was. Still, he knew they couldn't rely on others forever. This was their home, and it was up to them to protect it. Later that day, gathered his crew in the heart of the colony. The surviving colonists formed a loose circle around them, their faces a mixture of admiration and curiosity. Some held banners bearing crude depictions of warriors, while others clutched tools or weapons as signs of solidarity. It was clear they wanted to honor their saviors in whatever way they could. Stepped forward, his presence commanding silence. He scanned the crowd, taking in the weary but hopeful expressions. When he spoke, his voice carried far beyond its usual range, amplified by the natural authority he exuded. "You fought well," he began, his tone firm yet respectful. "Against overwhelming odds you stood your ground. You may think yourselves weak, but I see strength. Strength not of body, but of spirit. That is rare and valuable." A murmur rippled through the crowd, heads nodding in agreement. Paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "We came because your call reached us, because you showed courage when fear would have been easier. Know this, if anyone threatens you again, they will answer to us. Not because you are helpless, but because you are worth protecting." The colonists erupted into cheers, their voices echoing across the ruined landscape. Tears streamed down some faces, while others raised fists in defiance, vowing never to surrender again. Among them wiped her eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of promise. She hadn't expected such loyalty from strangers, let alone from beings as powerful as the. Raised a hand, silencing the crowd once more. "Rebuild your home, make it stronger than before. And know this, the galaxy may fear you, hate you, or try to destroy you, but they will never break you. Because when the call goes out, you answer. And when you answer, you win." With those final words, turned and walked away, his crew falling into step behind him. The colonists watched as they boarded their ships, their massive forms disappearing into the sleek, jagged vessels. Within moments, the fleet roared to life, engines flaring with raw power as they ascended into the sky. Back aboard the ironclad Revenant stood on the bridge, staring out at the shrinking image of Elysium Delta below. The colony was still wounded, but it was alive, and in time it would heal. He felt a rare pang of satisfaction, knowing they had made a difference. Lieutenant joined him, leaning against the railing beside him. "Think they'll be okay?" he asked, his tone unusually soft. Nodded. "They're strong, stronger than they realize. We gave them a chance. The rest is up to them." Chuckled quietly, "And us, what happens next?" Allowed himself a faint smile. "We return to the shadows. Watch, wait. Humanity doesn't need us, not yet, but when they do, we'll be ready." As the fleet disappeared into hyperspace, leaving Elysium Delta behind, the colonists gathered once more in the central square. They stood in silence for a moment, gazing at the empty sky where they had vanished. Then, as one, they began to chant, a single word repeated over and over. Hope. It was a promise, a vow, and a rallying cry. Hope that they could rise from the ashes. Hope that they could stand tall against whatever challenges lay ahead. And hope that, should the need arise, their unlikely allies would return to fight beside them once more. In the days that followed, news of the battle spread across the galaxy. Tales of the intervention reached distant star systems, sparking both awe and unease. Some celebrated humanity's resilience, while others whispered warnings of the consequences of crossing paths with Earth's newfound protectors. For now, however, peace reigned. The people of Elysium Delta rebuilt their lives, fortified by the knowledge that they were no longer alone. And somewhere, hidden within the storms of uncharted space, they sailed on, guardians of the weak and defenders of the brave. Their legend grew with each passing day, a reminder to all who heard it. Humanity might be fragile, but with allies like they were anything but powerless.